We're live. Hello everyone, Avery Young here, and welcome back to the Storyteller, episode 8. And today's story is another fairy tale classic that invokes the sweet tooth. Now, I've gone over a lot of fairy tales, and it's common with retellings of fairy tales that key elements stay in the aforementioned fairy tale. And as fairy tales are often retold and passed down through oral and written traditions, it becomes commonplace that once a story's been told often enough, it gains a symbol of sorts. Imagine you're talking with someone and then they drop this sad symbol and your mind immediately picks up what fairy tale they are mentioning. This is common, and I can even rattle off a few symbols that no doubt make you think of certain fairy tales. A tower in the middle of nowhere, or a garden of edible, delectable greens. Does the story of Rapunzel come to mind? Or perhaps a red cloak and hood with a little basket full of goodies. Does the story Little Red Riding Hood come to mind? Or maybe a pair of elegant glass-made footwear, where it brings up the story of Cinderella. Although in the original story, they were actually made of gold, not glass. But also, there's the infamous rose from the story of Beauty and the Beast. And there's, of course, Aladdin's magic lamp from the story of Arabian Nights. I could honestly go on, but those are some examples. But let me ask you something. What happens when you're talking with someone and they happen to mention a certain gingerbread house? If your mind goes to the story of Hansel and Gretel, then congratulations, you're smart. And if you don't know that fairy tale, well, today you're going to hear of it. Now, the story of Hansel and Gretel has become quite famous for the titular, and there go my speakers. It wouldn't be one of my live streams if something were going wrong. To the person who's in here, welcome. Come leave comments and questions. I'm just going over the subject before I actually start reading into the story. But yes, Hansel and Gretel has become iconically famous for the titular gingerbread house. The fun fact, in the original story told by the Grimm brothers, the house was described as being made of bread, with a roof made of cakes, and windows made out of clear sugar. And it's only in the Polish adaptation, Jan and Hannah, that we get the description of a titular gingerbread house. Though some could believe that the gingerbread house aspect came from the gingerbread houses made in Germany around the holiday season, though the story of Hansel and Gretel has little to do with the Christmas spirit. But that is an interesting connection. Another key aspect, again, as I've mentioned before constantly on this channel, is that stories have multiple retellings as they were originally passed down through word of mouth. And an interesting adaptation is in the Polish fairy tale, as I mentioned before, that the Polish fairy tale is where we get the gingerbread house. And in one specific story in particular, if I can just scroll up to the original, in Czechia, Bosnia, and Nemkova, I'm probably butchering those. I apologize. But the story that country has is called The House of Candy. Then there's the story of the witch from Russia, the children and the witch from Jamaica, Juan and Maria from the Philippines, and etc. These, of course, all being stories containing the element of orphaned or abandoned children, and usually an edible, delectable house of consumable goodness. But as I've mentioned before, I find it fascinating that these fairy tales have so many adaptations, and through the retellings did we get the titular gingerbread house description that stuck over all the years. Now, not only do we have like book adaptations of the story, but these adaptations, made by the modern media, of course, have been divided into two. Those being more sugar-coated and sweet, more palatable and consumable for the children audience, and I hate my speakers, I'm sorry. But the other side of that coin is that the adaptations of the Hansel and Gretel fairy tale by modern media also have the more darker thematic adaptations that stick closer to the fairy tale than other elements might. Now, an adaptation of the Hansel and Gretel story that I am personally particularly fond of is the story of A Tale Dark and Grim, written by none other than Adam Gidwitz. I personally think it's a magnificent piece of work. I actually own the book in my library. But it takes the story of Hansel and Gretel, and not only does it stick to the dark elements, but it actually expands on multiple dark stories from the Brothers Grimm. And Adam Gidwitz, I believe, is a literary genius, taking these stories and expanding on the lore and adding his own taste and flavor of horror to these stories, making them not only appealing to children, but to adults as well. As the story A Tale Dark and Grim follows the story of Hansel and Gretel as they go through horrific hardships and overcome near impossible feats to try and reconnect with their family. And that's one adaptation that I personally enjoy. Now, again, I always go for the dark element, the darker original stories. But the story of Hansel and Gretel I'm going to read to you is coming from the Book of Fairy Tales. For those of you who don't know, I actually did pull out this book in episode 3 when I read the story of the Three Little Pigs to you guys. So feel free to ask questions and comment as I read. And hi, Christian, welcome. I'm just getting ready to dive into the story of Hansel and Gretel. And appropriately enough, I have some chocolate chip cookies, baked by me, of course, and then I got a mug of milk because, it's fitting. Besides, we're talking about a house made of all sorts of sweets. I think it's fitting. Hello, Strawberry Queen. Hello, Christian. I hope you're doing well. But yes, I am going over the story of Hansel and Gretel. Which another interesting adaptation of the story I find is that you also have film adaptations, like the old with the old cartoon Babes in the Woods done by Disney back in the day, being a more child-friendly adaptation of the story Hansel and Gretel. Then you have films like Gretel and Hansel. Oh, also it's Mike, by the way, if you don't know. I figured when I reread your old comments, but yeah, I'm glad you're here. So welcome. I hate my speakers. My speakers are evil, and yes, fairy tales get dark. Oh, don't I know it? But yes. Then you have stories like Gretel and Hansel, which is a more horror fantasy thriller aspect of the story, sticking to the roots, but also diving into the more satanic, pagany, witch elements, given the antagonist of the story. Dark fairy tales? I have been summoned. Welcome. I've done forever. Isaac went missing. I appear out of my cave to say hello. Yeah, hi guys. So welcome. Welcome to the show, and I'm going to be reading an adaptation of Hansel and Gretel from the Book of Fairy Tales. I brought out this book when I read the story of the Three Little Pigs, and this one once again has beautiful illustrations. So once I finish reading the pages, I will show you the pictures. Hopefully you'll be able to see them on my show cam. But without further ado, let's dive into the messed up story of Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there lived a woodcutter and his wife. They had 2 children, a boy called Hansel and a girl whose name was Gretel. The woodcutter and his family lived in a cottage on the outskirts of the forest. The man worked hard, but he could never cut down enough trees or chop up enough wood to earn more than a bare living. When a famine hit the land and things Then a famine hit the land, and things became worse than ever. One night, the whole family went to bed hungry, and the bad-tempered wife spoke angrily to her husband. "There's enough food for you and me," she said, "but if we eat it, the children will go hungry. If we give it to them, we shall starve." "We must let the children have it," declared the kind woodcutter. "It does not matter about us." But his wife did not agree with him. "Then they will suffer less if we take them into the forest and leave them there," she decided. The woodcutter pleaded with her, but she would not listen, and at last he had promised to carry out her wicked plan. Now the cottage walls were thin, and Hansel and Gretel had been able to hear all that their parents had said. "Do not worry," said the little boy to his weeping sister. "I will make sure that we can find our way home again." He opened the door and crept outside. He filled his pockets with pebbles, which were glittering like silver on the ground in the moonlight. The next day the children's mother wakened them. "Get up," she cried. "We are all going to the forest to fetch wood." On the way, Hansel kept stopping and looking round. "Why do you look back, Hansel?" asked his father. "I am watching my white kitten sitting on the roof," replied Hansel. But each time he stopped, Hansel threw down one of the white pebbles. The woodcutter built a fire to keep the children warm, and then he left them. They fell asleep, and when they awoke, it was quite dark. Poor Gretel began to cry. "Do not worry," said Hansel. He took his sister to the path, and the pebbles were gleaming so brightly in the moonlight that they led the children home. Their father was delighted to see them, but their mother scolded them, pretending that the children had lost themselves. When things grew no better, the wicked mother decided to try the plan again, and this time Hansel could not get out to gather any pebbles. On the way, he stopped as he had done before, telling his father that he was watching his pigeon, but he was throwing down crumbs from the tiny pieces of bread they had been given. Pebbles! Yes, pebbles. Pebbles that shine so brightly in the moonlight. Bread! Yes, only a slice of bread because that's all they had, given that the woodcutter could not cut or chop up enough wood to make only to make a bare living. Which, I mean, that's the way it is sometimes, though. I'm surprised that no one is yelling at the mother for, wanting to throw her kids into the woods and essentially abandon them just so that way she and her husband can eat. I'm surprised no one is scolding the mother. Or cheering the father, who I'm kind of in the middle of a life. Oh, no. This is my brother. This is the first time we've ever had something like this happen on the Storyteller's Corner. Welcome. This is my brother, my little brother. Hi. Please let go. I'm trying to read a fairy tale.
Nope.
Anyway. I would throw hands if she wasn't a fictional character. Yeah. No, don't worry. I can.
Hello, Isaac.
Anyway, your breath stinks, by the way. Alrighty.
I just woke up too, okay?
Yeah, your breath stinks. And you just woke up. Why? Because you were up all night playing video games.
I literally went to bed at 12, okay?
At midnight. You literally 12 o'clock in the morning. Because you haven't become an adult yet. Anyway, back to the story. I am so sorry for that. I don't have a lock on my door, so I can't, lock people out when I'm doing live streams. So anyway, I am terribly sorry. Anyway, on with the story. Son of a gun. Okay, so Hansel's throwing down breadcrumbs from the tiny pieces of bread they had been given because the mother's gonna throw them out into the woods again. Okay. Once more, Hansel and Gretel were left behind. When the night came, they looked for the breadcrumbs, but alas, the birds had eaten them. The children tried to find their way, but every path looked the same, and soon they were lost. A shining white bird sang such a sweet song that the two children followed it down a path they had not tried before. At the end of the winding path, the two hungry children came upon a wonderful sight. They saw a dear little cottage which was different from any other house in the world. Oh, gosh darn birds! Yes, but keep in mind, birds do need to eat, so, And here are the two illustrations. You have Hansel gathering pebbles in the first one, and then you have Hansel and Gretel in the forest. These illustrations are gorgeous. I love them. But yeah, so they come across a house that was different from any other house in the world. And then here is our titular delectable edible gingerbread house. Does it not look tasty? Would you not like to try a bit of the roof? Or maybe lick one of the windows, because the windows are made of clear sugar. And again, as I stated earlier in the video, in the Grimm's Brothers version, the original as far as we know, the house was described as being made of bread, with a roof made of cakes, and the windows were made out of clear glass sugar. So yes, they came across a house that was unlike any other house in the world. It had walls of gingerbread, and the roof was of cakes, and all the windows were of crystal clear sugar. Hansel and Gretel began to eat pieces of the house when the door opened and the owner peered out. The person they saw was an ugly old woman who looked like a witch. She spoke kindly to Hansel and Gretel and beckoned them inside her lovely sweetmeat house. Which is ironic because sweetmeat is is it sweetbread? Yeah, it might be sweetbread, but sweetbread is another term for entrails, which are usually cooked up and eaten. Why? I don't know. So yeah, she beckons them inside to her house. She gave them a wonderful meal, and when they had finished, she showed them 2 little beds made up with warm blankets and soft pillows. She was so kind that Hansel and Gretel could not believe that she would do them any harm, and so they climbed into the beds and fell asleep at once. The old woman took the smile from her face and looked very horrible indeed as she rubbed her hands together greedily. "They will make a dainty dish," she whispered. "I will eat the boy first, and then his sister." I agree, the illustrations are amazing. Yep. Hear me out. If that house was outside, would it become stale over time? I'm just thinking what the house would taste like, lol. Oh yeah. Well, if you wanted to get technical, it probably would get stale over the years, not to mention being exposed to the elements. Plus, considering that it is made out of nothing but sweet treats, I can only imagine the birds and the bees and other such creatures who delight in sweet things would just eat that house to nothing. I can imagine freaking hummingbirds finding that house, starting to peck away at the gingerbread and stuff, and becoming so hopped up on a sugar rush that they would just fly around. The ants, yes, but this is a fairy tale. Fairy tales do not exist in the realm of reality, and so I am simply going to say that the house is as fresh as the day it was baked because magic, and its preserved freshness is through magic. She is a witch after all, so magic gingerbread houses stay fresh forever and they taste just as good. So yeah, deal with it. Alrighty, so once she gets the children in bed, that sweet smile falls from her face and she looks very horrible. Don't question magic. Exactly, Afton. You never question magic. So yeah, she says they will make a dainty dish and that she's going to eat the boy first and then his sister because she is a witch. And in this case, she's a cannibal. Now, in Adam Gidwit's version of the story, I find it fascinating as he says that the baker's woman isn't a witch. She's just a human, but she just really enjoys the taste of children. So yeah, anywho, but yeah, in this we got a cannibalistic witch, so yeah. Okay, poor Hansel and Gretel had fallen into a witch's trap. They were to make her a very special meal. Early the next morning, the old woman seized the sleeping Hansel in a bony hand and thrust him into a big cage before she wakened Gretel. "Get up, lazy bones, and cook the breakfast for your brother," she shouted. "You must feed him up until he is plump and tender enough for me to eat." Poor Gretel had to do what she was told. She cooked so much food for her brother that he soon grew plump. Now the old witch could not see very well, and so she could not discover how fat Hansel was growing. "Put out your finger, boy," she cried. "I can tell from that whether you are ready for my dinner." Clever Hansel poked a bone through the bars of his cage. The old woman grasped it and frowned, because what she thought was his finger was far too thin. The rest of him would not make a good meal for her. She said free food, lol. Indeed. I mean, technically it is free, though she did lure them in. And also, they kind of started eating at her house, which I'm pretty sure she would have noticed. So, yeah. Every day the witch went to the cage and felt the bone Hansel pushed out. Then she would leave him, muttering that he was far too thin. Poor little Gretel cooked all the lovely meals the witch insisted Hansel must eat. All the witch would let her have were the scraps, and the old hag saw to it that Gretel did not have too many of those. And in the Grimm's fairy tale, the witch gives Gretel nothing but crab shells to eat. Nothing but crab shells, and I'm pretty sure those are empty crab shells with no meat in them. So yeah. So as Hansel grew very plump indeed, Gretel became very thin. The days went by and the weeks, until a whole month had passed. Hansel sat in his cage, longing to get out and run about, but eating up all the good things poor Gretel had cooked for him. Oh, whoops, I almost forgot to show you guys the illustrations. Here on the first page we have the witch, and then in this page we have the witch checking to see if Hansel's fat enough, and Hansel sticking the bone out for her to feel, believing it's his finger. The little girl worked hard in the cottage, and she was the best servant the old woman had ever had. She cleaned the cottage until it was spick and span, mopping the floors and polishing the furniture. She made gingerbread and cake to repair the walls and roof of the magic cottage. All the time she tried to think of a plan to help Hansel out of his cage so they could both escape. The witch could not see very well, but her ears were very sharp. She did not miss one word the brother and sister said to one another, and so it seemed as if they would have to stay there until they were eaten up. At last, the old woman grew tired of waiting for Hansel to grow plump enough. "He will never get fat," she cried. "I will not wait any longer for my tasty meal. Whether he is fat or thin, I shall eat him tomorrow." Poor Gretel cried as she cleaned up the cottage. Then she went for the water the old woman wanted fetching, ready for the next day's big feast. When morning came, the witch made Gretel stoke up the fire so that the oven was hot enough to cook poor Hansel. "First we will bake," said the old woman. "The oven must be very hot for that. Pile on more sticks, girl, while I make the dough and knead it." Gretel stoked the fire until the flames shot out hungrily, while the old dame kneaded the dough into a big round loaf. "You must tell me if the oven is hot enough, child," demanded the witch. The wicked old woman had decided to push Gretel into the oven and to eat her before she started cooking Hansel. Gretel went to the oven. "How can I tell if the oven is hot enough?" she asked. "Creep inside," cackled the old witch. "Then you will know." Gretel pretended not to understand. Loaf. Yes, a loaf of bread. No, that's not what's going to be baking in the oven, I'll tell you that much. Okay, so Gretel pretended not to understand. "I do not know how to do it," she said. "Please show me the way." "You are a silly goose," cried the old witch. The oven is quite big enough for you to climb in and see for yourself." Gretel pretended to try. "The oven is too small. I cannot get in," she declared. "The opening is quite big enough," snarled the witch. "See, I could get in myself if I wanted to." She went to the oven and poked her head inside the door, which was just what Gretel was hoping she would do. The little girl gave the old woman a push, and into the oven she went, which was the end of her. Gretel rushed across to Hansel's cage and opened the door so that he could escape. He jumped out, and he and Gretel joined hands and danced around the witch's kitchen, which looked a much better place without her. Then Gretel made a meal, which this time she was able to enjoy with her brother. "Now we must decide what to do," said Hansel. "We must go home, of course," cried Gretel. But Hansel remembered what had happened to them before. Cooked alive, that's a bad way to go. Yes, it is. And I think it goes into a little bit more detail in the Grimm's version, but we're reading this one, and here are the illustrations. Here we have Gretel cleaning around the house, and then we have Gretel shoving the witch into the oven. Which, that's one way to go, and I'm glad they were able to escape her, but at the same time, I don't think that would smell good. I don't know. I like the smell of cooked meat as much as the next person, but I'm not a cannibal, so I think the smell, I don't know about you guys, but I think the smell of cooked flesh, like cooked human flesh, would not be pleasing to sniff at. I don't know. Yeah. Ugh. Human meat. Yeah. Don't think that would taste good. Anyway, let us stay in the cottage and look round first, said he. Perhaps the old witch had some treasure hidden away. The brother and sister went into each room in the house. In every corner they found bags of gold and precious stones, which the old woman had stolen from the unfortunate people who had crossed her path. Hansel packed his pockets with pearls, diamonds, and rubies, while Gretel filled her apron. Then they picked up the bags of gold and money and set off to find their way home once more. Hansel and Gretel hurried away from the witch's part of the forest as fast as they could, but they were still as lost as they had been before. They found a new path and went along it. Just eat the house. She won't need it. I mean, yeah, they could eat the house. Though that does bring up the question that since the witch is dead, a la cooked in her own oven, would the magic around the house dissipate, leaving the house to, fall to ruins and be subjected to being eaten by ants and bears and raccoons and I don't know, rabbits with a sugar addiction. I don't know. Anyway, but we're not diving into that. So yeah, they find a bunch of treasure. They stuff it in their pockets, but they're lost as before. They find a new path and go along with the new path that they found. Okay. When they came to the end of it, a huge lake lay spread before them. I wish we could cross over it, said Gretel. Then we would be at the other side of the woods and nearer to our home. There is no bridge, sighed Hansel, and no sign of a ferry boat either. I see a big white duck, cried Gretel. Perhaps she can help us get to the water, get across the water. The children called to the duck, and she swam across to them. Climb on her back, Gretel, cried Hansel. He began to scramble over the bird's white wings, but stopped when Gretel said, You go first with the bags of gold, Hansel, then the kind duck will come back for me. 2 of us will be too heavy for her. So that is what they did. So that is what they did. The duck swam on the other side with Hansel and his bags of gold, then came back for Gretel with her apron full of precious stones. That part of the forest on the other side of the lake was much nearer to the children's home, and at last they found a path which led them to it. It looked just as it had done when they had left it, but inside the house things were not the same. The wicked mother had died, and their father was sitting alone. He was mourning in his unkindness to his children, as he had done every day since they had gone. Hansel and Gretel threw themselves into their father's arms, and he hugged and kissed them. I shall never send you away again, he cried. Some way we will manage, however poor we are. Then Hansel, with his father looking on in amazement, emptied the precious stones out of his pockets, and Gretel spilled her apron full onto the table. After that, they gave their father the bags of gold, and there is no doubt at all that they all lived together, happily ever after. And then the final illustrations, we see Gretel and Hansel finding the gold and the treasure in the witch's house. And then in the last illustration, we see Hansel and Gretel running back to their father. And that is the end of an adaptation of the story of Hansel and Gretel. And again, the Grimm's fairy tale version is dark, but this, well, thank you for the applause emojis. They are appreciated. But as I mentioned before, there are multiple adaptations of the story, and with the Grimm's version describing it as a house of bread with cakes on the roof and clear windows made of sugar, it's only in the Polish fairy tale John and Hannah that we get the gingerbread house description. And then another adaptation of the story is called The House of Candy. And then, of course, there is a fairy tale in Romania called The Little Boy and the Wicked Stepmother. And these adaptations all have the same theme and are connected via they are about abandoned children. With Hansel and Gretel, The House of Candy, John and Hannah, and a few of these other ones being tied in with the Gingerbread House. And something that I've done lately, at least during these last few episodes, is I have not only read the story, but then I've also read some adaptations. And I happen to have some of the adaptations on my laptop right now. So if you guys wanted to, I could read another version of the story Hansel and Gretel if you want to. I just need to hear 3 yeses and then I will read another one. But if you guys don't want me to read another one, then we can just end here. You should put these streams into a playlist. I should, shouldn't I? Well, Hoodwink 2 made them evil. Yeah. Yeah, Hoodwink 2 did make Hansel and Gretel evil. And honestly, I prefer the first Hoodwinked to the second one. The second one, I don't know, it had for me at least, the animation was off. The characters were different, and like they did not look the way they did, not to mention the voice actors were kind of replaced. And you could also understand Twitchy, which was kind of a pet peeve for me. It's like you're not supposed to understand him, or if you can't understand him, like you can only make out certain pieces because he talks so freaking fast. But yeah, that's just me. So that's 3 yeses. What adaptation would you like me to read? I could read you the Hansel and Gretel by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. There's there's Ninino. It's an Italian story. I'm trying to say it. Bear with me. Ninilo and Ninella, which is an Italian fairy tale. There's Little Thumb, which is French by Charles Perrault. There's an old story in Ireland, Molly Whoopee, which is an English fairy tale. As I mentioned before, John and Hannah, which is Polish, and the House of Candy from Czechia Bozena Nemkova. I am butchering those. I apologize. There's Old Gruel, which is Moravia. The Little Boy and the Wicked Stepmother from Romania, The Witch from Russia, which is a Russian fairy tale, Magic Flight, African American, The Children and the Witch from Jamaica, Juan and Maria from the Philippines. So those are the adaptations I can read to you guys. The French version would be cool. Interesting. Any of them is fine with me. So Afton doesn't really care which one I read because any of them are fine. And Kira says the French version would be cool. Isaac, you're the tiebreaker. Like, if you say pick one at random, I will pick one at random. If you say the French one, then I will read the French story. But the Jamaica is interesting. I haven't read the Jamaican one, so that could be interesting. And also considering that my brother barged into my bedroom and interrupted the live stream, I feel like I owe you guys a fairy tale to apologize. Because again, I don't have a lock on my bedroom door, and even though I keep my door closed and people are supposed to knock, and if I don't respond, they are supposed to leave me alone, especially when I'm doing a live stream. So yeah. Okay, Isaac said random, so I will pick one at random. And my brother's that, so let's enjoy a little music while I pick one at random. Yes, I have to make a show of it. And also, I want to know what you guys thought of the fairy tale. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. These are all really good fairy tales. Let's see. Which one? Which one? Let's see. Yes, I'm the suspension. Ruby did do Hansel and Gretel named Hazel and Gretchen. That sounds like sisters though. But yeah, I may be dragging it out, but also, you know, building up the dramatic tension. You know what? I'm going to read the story of John and Hannah, and then afterwards, if you would like, I'll read the story of Nininolo and Ninella. Ninilo. That's how you say it. Ninilo and Ninella. Okay, finally figured out how to say it. Yes! Eureka! Alright, so yeah, I will be reading the story of John and Hannah, which is the Polish adaptation, which again, where we get the titular gingerbread house imagery. And then afterwards, if you guys want to, I will read the story of Ninilo and Nanella, if you guys like. So here's the story of John and Hannah which is a story from Poland. This will be fun. Now, once upon a time, there were a father and a mother who had a large flock of children. The father went down and brought a scoopful of peas and gave each child 1 pea, but John and Hannah did not get any. This made them cry. The father said, "Be quiet and don't cry. I am going into the forest to chop wood. You can come along and look for berries." The father took a breadboard and a rolling pin with him and hung them on a tree. He said to John and Hannah, "Just go and pick berries. You can pick berries as long as I am chopping wood." The wind blew the breadboard and the rolling pin against each other, and they had thought their father was still chopping wood, so they continued to pick berries. After they had eaten until they were full and had filled their little buckets as well, they went and looked for their father. They came to the place where the breadboard and the rolling pin were hanging, but no father was there. They cried. They ran about in the wood shouting, but they did not find anyone. Suddenly, they came to a little gingerbread house. They began to crumble off some little pieces. Crumble, crumble, from old Vera's little house. Then old Vera came running out. "Who's there?" They quickly hid themselves so that she could not find them, but they continued to crumble little pieces of the house. Crumble, crumble, from old Vera's little house. So she ran out very fast and caught them. She took them inside and said, "Now I am going to fatten you up." And she locked them into a little stall and gave them nothing but bread and milk to eat. After a while, she wanted to see if they were fattened up enough. "John, stick out your finger. Are you fattened up yet?" But he stuck out a little whistle he had brought from home. She made a cut in it. "Oh, you are not fat enough yet." "Hannah, stick out your finger. Are you fattened up yet?" But she stuck out a finger that had a ring on it. Old Vera made a cut in the ring. "Oh, you are not fat enough yet either." Then they cried a lot, and John lost his little whistle, and Hannah lost her ring. Old Vera Old Vera came again to see if they were fattened up enough. "John, stick out your finger." Old Vera made a cut in it, and it bled a little. Hansel and Gretel story made me wonder if it is possible to have a house of candy in real life. You could try making a house out of candy, Akira, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't work out because not only would it be exposed to the elements, but it would also get stale and moldy depending on if it rains. Plus, you would be overrun with ants and other such creatures who have sweet tooths. So yeah, I don't think you could live in a candy house in real life. Possibly soggy, exactly, Afton. Another point out. So yeah, John, old Vera cuts the finger and it bleeds a little. "Hannah, stick out your finger." Old Vera made a cut in it and it bled a little. "Yes, you are fattened up enough. Now I am going to roast you." She heated up her oven very hot, took John and Hannah and said, "Sit on the bread pusher." They sat on the bread pusher, now this way and now that way. Vera told them how they were supposed to sit, but every time they fell off. "We don't know how we're supposed to sit. You show us." Then old Vera sat on the bread pusher, and bang! They pushed her into the glowing oven. Old Vera burned up completely, so the little gingerbread house was theirs, and if they haven't sold it, they still have it to this very day. And that is the end of the story of John and Hannah, which is the Polish adaptation. So, in the end, John and Hannah actually do live in the gingerbread fair in the house made of gingerbread. So that's definitely interesting, but it still holds the aspect of the antagonist being burned to death in the oven, which it doesn't state that old Vera is a witch, though she possibly could have been a hag, which is a type of fairy, maybe. Happy ending. Yeah, happy ending if you're not the antagonist. Then you get burned alive in the oven. So Yeah. Anyway, but so that was the Polish adaptation. Would you guys like to hear the story of Ninilo and Nanella, which is the Italian adaptation of the story of Hansel and Gretel? If I get 3 yeses, I will read that story. Why does the witch want to eat children instead of other animals? No one knows. Again, in Adam Gidwit's adaptation, he tells the story of Hansel and Gretel. That's 3 yeses, so all right, I will get to that. But yeah, to answer your question, Kira, no one knows. I mean, monsters have been known to eat human flesh, though that could be just one aspect of it. But then again, um, I can't really give you a solid answer. In Adam Gidwit's story, A Tale Dark and Grim, the baker's woman is just a human. She's not a witch or anything, but she's simply human, and she finds out that over time, like, she likes animal meat, but what she really, really likes is child, and she actually ended up eating her first child that she gave birth to, which is very messed up and horrible. But I mean, Adam Gidwitz is a literary genius, and I mean that's one way to explain why she likes to eat children. But I mean, I don't know. Again, given my beliefs and where I stand, I mean, I don't think I'd eat human and anytime soon. Like, no, like, ugh. Not to mention like the ethical, pardon, not to mention the ethical side of it, eating people. Ugh. Oh no. Anyway, okay. Now for the story of Ninilo and Ninella, which is an Italian version of the fairy tale. Alrighty, so here we go. Let's get into this. Woe to him who thinks to find a governess for his children by giving them a stepmother. He only brings into his house the cause of their ruin. There never yet was a stepmother who looked kindly on the children of another, or if by chance such a one were never found, she would be regarded as a miracle and be called a white crow. But besides all of those whom you may have heard, I will now tell you of another, to be added to the list of heartless stepmothers, whom you will consider well deserving the punishment she purchased for herself with ready money. There was once a good man named Janucci. These Italian names, I apologize. I'm going to try and pronounce it to the best of my ability, so yeah. There once was a good man named Januccio, who had 2 children, Nanilo and Ninella, whom he loved as much as his own life. But death, having, with the smooth file of time, severed the prison bars of his wife's soul, he took to himself a cruel woman, who had no sooner set foot in his house than she began to ride the high horse, saying, "Am I here indeed to look after other folks' children? A pretty job I have undertaken, to have all this trouble and be forever teased by a couple of squalling brats. Would would that I had broken my neck ere I ever came to this place, to have bad food, worse drink, and get no sleep at night. Here's a life to lead. Forsooth I came as a wife, and not as a servant. But I must find some means of getting rid of these creatures, or it will cost me my life. Better to blush once than to grow pale 100 times. So I've done with them, for I am resolved to send them away, or to leave the house myself forever." Charming woman! Charming, really. Ah, Januccio, buddy. Really? Really? You couldn't have found a better woman who was at least, decent. You couldn't have tried finding one of these miracle women who are good stepmothers, who are called white crows. Really? Oh boy. Yeah, that was painful to read. You see who's really charming. Yeah, charming with the sarcastic sparkles. Like, jeez, that woman. Wow, that was painful to read. That, oh boy. Woo! Yeah. Yeah, so okay. I'm just gonna have a bite of chocolate chip cookie. That was bad. Oh. So yeah, that's the stepmother. I mean, at least Italy's honest. And they have their own version of messed up fairy tales, which I could easily get into. Avery needed a cookie after that. Damn straight I needed a cookie. That was horrible. Jeez, this woman. Wow. Okay. The poor husband, who had some affection for this woman, said to her, "Softly, wife, don't be angry, for sugar is dear, and tomorrow morning, before the cock crows, I will remove this annoyance in order to please you." Okay, hang on a sec. Oh boy. Januscio? Really? Jeez. And that, my friends, is what we call a henpecked husband. Jeez, though. Like, I get that he has affection for the woman, but dude, you love these children more than as much as your own life. Why? Why do you not defend them or stick up for them? These are your children who you love as much as your own life. Why? I get that she's henpecking you, but still, you're the husband. What you say goes. I'm sorry. Jeez, oh boy. Whose man is this? I need answers. My cat is here with me. Yay, Isaac. But yeah, I'm often, whose man is this? I need answers. And which from the story has ASMR? Well, we'll see, Akira. I got some ASMRs in pipeline, but yeah. Januscio. Boy. Why? Anywho. Okay, so yeah, he has some affection. He's like, "Don't worry, sweetie. Tomorrow morning I'll take care of this just to please you." Blink, blink. Oh boy, anyway. Okay. So the next morning, ere the dawn had hung out the red counterpane at the window of the east to air it, Januscio took the children, one by each hand, and with a good basket full of things to eat upon his arm, he led them to a wood where an army of poplars and beech trees were holding the shades besieged. Then Januscio said, "My little children, stay here in this wood, and eat and drink merrily, but if you want anything, follow this line of ashes which I have been strewing as we came along. This will be a clue to lead you out of the labyrinth and bring you straight home." Then giving them both a kiss, he returned weeping to his house. But at the hour when all creatures summoned by the constable night pay to nature the tax of negro repose, the two children began to feel afraid at remaining in that lonesome place, where the waters of a river, which was thrashing the impertinent stones for obstructing its course, would have frightened even a hero. So they went slowly along the path of ashes, as it was already midnight ere they had reached their home. Okay, Januscio, you have got some redemption here. You have some redemption here. At least you gave them a basket full of food, and you went away weeping. So you do actually care about these children. Good. Still, though, that was a jerk move to leave them in the woods just because your wife's henpecked you and she's an entitled, terrible person. My goodness. Unfortunately, I have to go. Guys, okay. Bye, Isaac. I'm glad you were able to come. So yeah, Januscio, you got some redemption points there. Don't blow it again, please. Oh, this woman. Okay. Return home. When Pascosa, I'm pretty sure I said that right. When Pascosa, their stepmother, saw the children, she acted not like a woman, but a perfect fury, crying aloud, wringing her hands, stamping with her feet, snorting like a frightened horse, and exclaiming, "What fine piece of work is this? Is there no way of ridding the house of these creatures? Is it possible, husband, that you are determined to keep them here to plague my very life out? Go, take them out of my sight. I'll not wait for the crowing of the cocks and the cackling of the hens. Or else be assured that tomorrow morning I'll go off to my parents' house, for you do not deserve me. I have not brought you so many fine things, only to be made the slave of children who are not my own. Wow! This woman! This woman makes me angry! Damn! Why? Why are you so entitled, you terrible woman? They're just children who need a mother, a loving, nurturing mother, but apparently that's too much for you to comprehend. Wow. 3 redemption points. It's just a story, it's just a story, it's just a story. I know it's just a story, but at the same time, wow, I don't know. She just, if I don't know. I've heard about quite a lot of entitled people, so I'm just like, anyway, I'm having another bite of cookie, dang it. Oh. Gosh, damn. And not only that, but she just has a temper tantrum over it. Like, what are you, 3? My goodness. It's bonkers. Alrighty, dealy. Okay. So, after the temper tantrum, jeez, this woman, I hate her. Poor Januscio, who saw that matters were growing rather too warm, immediately took the little ones and returned to the wood, where, giving the children another basketful of food, he said to them, "You see, my dears, how this wife of mine, who has come to my house to be your ruin and a nail in my heart, hates you. Therefore remain in this wood, where the trees, more compassionate, will give you shelter from the sun, where the river, more charitable, will give you drink without poison, and the earth, more kind, will give you a pillow of grass without danger. And when you want food, follow this little path of bran which I have made for you in a straight line, and you can come and seek what you require." So saying, he turned away his face, not to let himself be seen to weep and dishearten the poor little creatures. So he left. I mean, at least he didn't say it just to please his wife, but now he's doing it to try and help his children out, because, as we've seen before, Pascosa is unhinged and a terrible individual. So you still got the redemption points, but my goodness. Jeez. When Nanilo and Nanella had eaten all that was in the basket, they wanted to return home, but alas, a jackass, the son of ill luck, had eaten up all the bran that was strewn upon the ground, so they lost their way, and wandered about forlorn in the woods for several days, feeding on acorns and chestnuts, which they had found fallen on the ground. But heaven always extends its arm over to the innocent. There came by chance a prince to hunt in that wood. Then Nanilo, hearing the baying of the hounds, was so frightened that he crept into a hollow tree, and Nanella set off running at full speed, until she came out of the wood, and found herself on the seashore. Now it happened that some pirates, who had landed there to get fuel, saw Nanella and carried her off, and their captain took her home with him, where he and his wife, having just lost a little girl, took her as their daughter. Meanwhile, Nanilo, who was hidden himself in the tree, was surrounded by the dogs, and made such a furious barking that the prince sent out to find the cause. And when he discovered the pretty little boy, who was so young that he could not tell who were his father and mother, he ordered one of the huntsmen to set him upon his saddle and take him to the royal palace. Then he had him brought up with great care, and instructed in various arts, and among others he had taught him that of a carver. So that, for 3 or 4 years had passed, Nanilo became so expert in this art that he could carve a joint to a hair. Carving being cutting meat. I finally made it into one of these. Hey, babe. Hi! Hi, honey. I hope you're doing well. I am reading an Italian adaptation of the story of Hansel and Gretel, which is Nanilo and Nanella. Which, it's very good, but the stepmother is a piece of work. She makes me very angry. That sounds interesting, Akira. I mean, I could see what I could Proxy and Avery voice Hansel and Gretel in ASMR. Maybe. Because he and I currently have a project underway that we're going to get to later on when the time comes. So, Nanilo and Nanella have been separated. Nanella is being raised by a pirate captain, and I'm excited to work on it too. Just let me know when you're ready to do that, and we can work on that. But yeah, so Nanella is being raised by pirates, which is cool. That is awesome. And then Nanilo is being raised by a prince and being trained in various arts. So, found families, good time. And these parents actually seem decent. Unlike the stepmother who shall not be named and who makes me angry. Who makes me very, very angry. She better get an Italian style comeuppance of gruesome bloodiness, or so help me, I'm gonna get angry. I will be pissed. Anyway, okay, back to the story. Okay, Nilo becomes so expert in his art that he could carve a joint to a hair. Which I believe that means like carving from cooked meat, I think. I'm not sure though. Now, about this time, it was discovered that the captain of the ship who had taken Nanella to his house was a sea robber, and the people wished to take him prisoner. But getting timely notice from the clerks in the law courts, who were his friends, who he kept in his pay, he fled with all his family. It was decreed, however, perhaps by the judgment of heaven, that he who had committed his crimes upon the sea should suffer the punishment of them. For having embarked in a small boat, no sooner was he upon the open sea than there came such a storm of wind and tumult of the waves that the boat was upset and all were drowned, all except Nanella, who, having no share in the corsair's robberies, like his wife and children, escaped the danger. For just then a large enchanted fish, which was swimming about the boat, opened its huge throat and swallowed her down. The little girl now thought to herself that her days were surely at an end, when suddenly she found a thing to amaze her inside the fish. A beautiful fields and fine gardens and a splendid mansion, with all that heart could desire, in which she lived like a princess. She was carried quickly by the fish to a rock, where it chanced that the prince had come to escape the burning heat of a summer, and to enjoy the cool sea breezes. And whilst a great banquet was preparing, Nanilo had stepped out upon the balcony of the palace on the rock to sharpen some knives, priding himself greatly on acquiring honor from his office. When Nanella saw him through the fish's throat, she cried out, "Brother, brother, your task is done. The tables are laid out, every one. But here in the fish I must sit and sigh. Oh, brother, without you I soon shall die." Nanilo at first paid no attention to the voice, but the prince, who was standing on another balcony, had also heard it, turned in the direction whence the sound came, and saw the fish. And when he again heard the same words, he was beside himself with amazement, and ordered a number of servants to try whether, by any means, they could ensnare the fish and draw it to land. At last, hearing the words, "Brother, brother," continually repeated, he asked all his servants one by one whether any of them had lost a sister. And Anila replied that he recollected, as a dream, having had a sister when the prince found him in the wood, but he had never since heard any tidings of her. Then the prince told him to go near to the fish to see what was the matter, for perhaps this adventurer might concern him. So it sounds like things are looking up. I'm going to head off, but you're doing a great job, honey. Thank you, Proxy. What's up, Book Dragon Crew? I'm reading an Italian adaptation of the story of Hansel and Gretel. It's called Nanilo and Nanella. It did take a turn, but it's getting better. I mean, it's getting better at least. No more stepmother as far as we can tell. And I'm going to shut my bedroom door. I'm sorry. My brother is very loud. He doesn't know that his mouth is close to the microphone, and so he should lower his voice, for crying out loud. He plays his video games all the time. He is so loud. He has not yet matured. He has graduated, so yeah, this is the stuff I have to deal with. I'm terribly sorry for the interruptions to the story. Anyway, but this is what I live with. Anyway, Okay, so this adventure might concern him. As soon as Nanilo approached the fish, it raised up its head upon the rock and opened its throat 6 palms wide. Nanella stepped out, so beautiful that she looked just like a nymph in some interlude come forth from that animal at the incantation of a magician. And when the prince asked her how it had all happened, she told him a part of her sad story and the hatred of their stepmother, but not being able to recollect the name of their father nor of their home. The prince caused a proclamation to be issued, commanding that whoever had lost 2 children named Nanilo and Nanella in a wood should come to the royal palace, and he would there receive joyful news to them. Janusio, who, who had all this time passed a sad and disconsolate life, believing that his children had been devoured by wolves, now hastened with the greatest joy to seek the prince, and told him that he had lost the children. And when he related the story, he had been compelled to take them to the wood, and the prince gave him a good scolding, calling him a blockhead for allowing a woman to put her heel upon his neck till he was brought to send away 2 such jewels as his children. And after he had broken Januccio's head with these words, he applied to it the plaster of consolation, showing him the children, whom the father embraced and kissed for half an hour without being satisfied. Okay, so yeah, good prince, calling him a blockhead for allowing a woman to put her heel upon his neck and henpecking him. So good prince. Januccio, I'm sorry, buddy, you kind of deserve that, considering that you threw them. Anyway, okay. Okay. All right, back to the story. It took a turn, but it looks like it's getting better. Things are getting better. Okay. Okay. Then the prince made him pull off his jacket and had him dressed like a lord, and sending for Januccio's wife, he showed her those 2 golden pippins, asked her what that person would deserve who should do them any harm, and even endanger their lives. And she replied, "For my part, I would put her in a closed casket and send her rolling down a mountain." "So shall it be done," said the prince. "The goat has butted herself. Quick now, you have passed the sentence, and you must suffer it, for having borne these beautiful stepchildren such malice." So he gave the orders that the sentence should be instantly executed. Then, choosing a very rich lord among his vassals, he gave him Nanella to wife, and the daughter of another great lord to Nanilo, allowing them enough to live upon with their father, so that they wanted for nothing in the world. But the stepmother, shut into the cask and shut out from life, kept on crying through the bunghole as long as she had breath. To him whom mischief seeks, shall mischief fall. There comes an hour that recompenses all. So yay. It wasn't as bloody as I was expected, but I mean, she's shut in a casket, and as it's described, there are no friggin' air holes. So they put her in a barrel, they rolled her down a mountain, and there are no air holes in the barrel as far as the story says, so that was still a satisfying Italian style punishment. So yeah, I'm happy. I'm satisfied. That is the end of the story of Ninilo and Ninella, which was a very good Italian adaptation. What do you guys all think, by the way, of the story? No blood was included. Yeah, there was no blood, but she was stuffed in a barrel and rolled down a mountain. That's still good. And I mean, there probably was blood considering how many times, depending on how big the mountain was. But yeah. 10 out of 10, I enjoyed it. And horror movies did Hansel and Gretel. Yes, they did. So I wonder why Disney didn't do Hansel and Gretel and sugarcoated. They kind of did at one point. I think, back in the old days, they did a cartoon called Babes in the Woods, in which there is a witch and she has a gingerbread house and she lures them in. But she turns Hansel and Gretel, or she turns the boy at least into a spider. And she lures children in with her candy house, and then she turns them into lizards, spiders, rats, bats, cats, and other horror, kind of really spooky critters. So that's the Hansel and Gretel and 2 other adaptations. I could read one more if you wanted me to, follow up the rule of 3, read 3 adaptations. if you want me to, but that's only if I get the aforementioned 3 yeses. Because so far we've done Poland and we've done Italy. So do you guys want to hear one last fairy tale based off of Hansel and Gretel? Sure, why not? That's 1 yes. Akira, what say you? That's 2 yeses. Do we have any more? All right. Let's go with this one. Yeah, I say yes, but let's enjoy some music. Do you guys want to pick the story, or do you want me to pick another story at random? I like it. But yeah, I feel like I needed to finish the rest of that chocolate chip cookie. Okay. Afton wants me to pick at random. Akira, what do you say? They are good. My mom made the cookie dough. I just baked them. But when I bake chocolate chip cookies, like if I don't gather them and put them in my room, then I don't get any because they're that good. I call them crack cocaine cookies. Because like people really like when I make chocolate chip cookies. Yes, please. What, Akira? Nothing like a little Figaro. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. I could read an old story. An old... And there go my speakers. I hate my speakers. The French version of Hansel and Gretel. There we go. Alright. Alright, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 21. There we go. Actually, you know what? I'll pick the story, but I have an idea. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna pick the story, and I've 17. You know what? I have decided I will pick the story, and I know which one I'm gonna read. Because there's an Irish adaptation. And it's short. And it's messed up as all heck. Because all the adaptations of Hansel and Gretel that I've read to you, including the Hansel and Gretel story, they have had some messed up elements, but they've had happy endings. And I, for one, always go for the dark elements, even if it means less than happy endings. So, let's end this on a messed up note, because there's always gotta be a messed up version. Yes. That's kind of the running theme of this show. So let's end this stream on a messed up note, and then I'll get to the morals and such. So let's do this. We're going to Ireland, boys and girls, with an old story. That's literally just what it's called, an old story. Once upon a time, there was a cruel father, and he had 2 little children, a boy and a girl. He led them into a large wood. They walked through the wood for a while, and the father asked the children if they were feeling hungry, and they said they were. The father said he would go and get them something for them to eat. He went away and never returned. and the children wandered through the wood, and after a while died of starvation. It is said the robins brought leaves and covered their dead bodies. This was written by Rupert Elliott, told by my mother. So that is an old story that has some semblance to the story of Hansel and Gretel, with tying in with two abandoned children. But that was an old story. I told you it was short. So there we go. That was a few of that was the story of Hansel and Gretel, as well as a few adaptations. Dang, yeah, Afton Forever. Some fairy tales were like that. Again, original fairy tales. They were made by adults, for adults, and told by other adults. And oftentimes they weren't pretty. So, But yeah, that was the story of Hansel and Gretel, as well as some adaptations from other parts of the world. Now, I've said it before and I shall say it again, but every time I read these stories, I always try and find a moral. And yes, I'm plugging in my laptop because it's going to run low on battery soon, and I don't want it to do that before I finish this live stream. So, what are some morals of the story of Hansel and Gretel? Well, for starters, this is a cautionary tale warning you about talking to strangers, but it also follows in the Snow White logic of looks can be deceiving. Like, if it looks too good to be true, rest assured, it's a trap. Because Hansel and Gretel found that gingerbread house, and they thought their troubles would be over. Not only that, but the witch pretended to be very sweet and kindly to them, treating them well, feeding them good food, and putting them to bed in nice soft beds. But that's only a facade, as she wanted to cook and eat them. Because cannibal witches. But yes, looks can be deceiving, and be careful of who you trust. Also tying into the Little Red Riding Hood story, which I believe was episode 4, I think. Lesson learned: don't trust candy houses and don't eat the house, because you may have to pay for property damage. Yeah, Afton. But jokes aside, if it looks too good to be true, rest assured it might be a trap. Like, listen to your gut. Like, if you are in a situation and your gut is giving you that twisty, prickly feeling, like, don't like this, you should probably trust that. That's one of the reasons why we've been alive so long. And again, not all sweet and good things are as sweet and as good as they seem. What moral would I take from this? As I always try to find my own moral. Definitely being kind to others, in that the duck was kind and it led Hansel and Gretel go across the water on its back. But also be careful. Like, again, not every good thing is as good as it seems. Things are not always what they seem in this place, so you can't take anything for granted. Now, are there good people in the world? Of course there are, just as there are bad people in the world. But one of the dangerous things about bad people is they don't always look dangerous. And so you got to be careful. Use your head and trust your gut. And those are the two morals that I personally am able to. Those are my takeaway morals from the story of Hansel and Gretel. And yeah, I think that sums it all up. Thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry about all the hiccups that this live stream had, but it wouldn't be my live stream if something weren't going wrong or there wasn't a hiccup of some sort going on. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!